Hello, everybody. Welcome to our CFTE Lounge event. I'm Manuela Montagnana, and I have the honor to be the president of the board of CFTE. I'm really sorry that I cannot be with you today in Boston for this great event, and I'm talking to you from Paris, actually. Um, why am I at CFTE? Well, because when I heard about CFTE for the first time 18 months ago, I was really excited about this opportunity to transform movement into a healing power for trauma survivors. I am an HR professional. I've worked with people all my career in different settings, industries, services, technology, but I've always had at heart to make sure that we are an inclusive environment where the ones that have the voices that are least heard are having a voice. And so working on inclusion and how a diverse population can get a platform, an opportunity to rise and shine has been one of my core goals. At CFT today, I'm very excited that we are moving on to a new chapter. This is the beginning of being our own nonprofit, and it's going to help us develop further, having a global reach, which is so important today. Unfortunately, trauma survivors will still be there and will still need help. And so healing through the movement and through the different offers and services that we have at CFTE is a very concrete way to make this place a better world. So enjoy the morning. I hope you will have a great time and welcome to the CFTE community. Hope to see you soon.
So good morning. My name is Jen Turner. I am the executive director of the Center for Trauma and Embodiment. And I'm so glad you all are here. Welcome, welcome to our community of care and to our healing community. I have some things for myself to remember because I'm super pumped, but I also have my notes, so I'm going to stick with those too. First of all, thank you for the Broad Institute for hosting us, for welcoming us, for beginning to partner with us. It's an honor to be here and be in community. A special shout out to Mira. I don't know if she's in here, but for all of the hard work that she's done. A huge thank you to Eastern Bank for the sponsorship of this event and this morning. Thank you to Susan Steiner and Karen Giorgio for being an amazing event committee. And thank you live stream people who are here, wherever you are. And thank you for being here. Also a big thank you to Kathy Meisner, who has helped us with strategic planning about 3 years ago. And she really urged us to move out on our own. Like, you're ready for this. If the timing's right, you're ready. And we really needed that push. And she continues to nurture and mentor us in this process. You know, Dave and I have experience as direct care providers, people who think about these things, create these things. Running a nonprofit is a whole different animal. And Kathy has been an amazing guide in that process. So thank you so much for that. So what I'd like to start us with is an embodied practice. A few years ago, one of our colleagues, Sydney Spears, who's on the leadership team, pointed out that we were starting all of our meetings and just diving in with our brains. We're an organization that focuses on the whole person, bringing our whole selves, our intuition, our bodies into conversation, into learning, into healing. And so we started this practice of beginning most meetings with a soft landing. A chance to check in with your body, a chance to check in with yourself more fully, and bring yourself more fully into the space. So I'd love to invite each of you to join me in that in this moment. So you're welcome. You could put your things down, or you could scooch back from your table. Sorry, I'm a mover. And you're welcome to maybe take a moment to drop into your body. So I'm going to sit too, so I can join you. Your eyes could be open or closed, however you like. A chance, if you'd like, to notice that you have a body. Also to notice that you're here, that you made it, Despite traffic, morning, yada, yada, you're here. And if you'd like, you could take a few minutes to notice yourself. And one way you might notice yourself could be through movement. So if you'd like, you could move your chin from side to side. Now, as I'm offering suggestions, you might make a different choice about how you move or even if you move. You could also lift and lower your chin. Maybe exploring a range of movement in your neck. You're welcome to continue with this, or at some point you could even drop your chin. Maybe your head is heavy. Could wiggle your jaw and possibly beginning to shift into some kind of head circle. Circles could be smaller or wider in range. That's your choice. Maybe circling in both directions. And you could stay with this if you'd like. Or another possibility could be that you sort of scooch forward on your chair and possibly exploring some spinal movement. So one way to do that could be to lengthen your spine and lift your chin. Maybe then rounding your spine and dropping your chin. So any range of movement is welcome here. And again, you might be deciding you want to do something different with your body. Maybe you're still landing, you want to just be still, or there's another way you'd like to move. As you're moving, you might also choose to link your breath to your movement, or you could breathe and move separately. And then whenever you're ready, you're welcome to find your way back to center. So that's such a brief opportunity to drop into your body. Mindy gave me the look, so I was like, keep it moving. But a chance to notice that you have a body, to bring your body into this space, because it's part of us, right? So more than 24 years ago, we planted a seed. Really, Dave planted a seed, and then I came and helped out with the garden and stuff. But with a vision that we might offer and grow opportunities for healing from traumatic experiences that expand beyond traditional psychotherapy and psychiatry. Healing that honors us as a whole and as complex beings, as embodied beings that have an intuition and a deep inner wisdom. Healing that doesn't approach PTSD and complex trauma as a disease or a pathology, but rather a really profound response to circumstances that are overwhelming to our system and that are chaotic and unpredictable. What we also know is that we wanted to approach healing in a way that, as providers, we didn't just rest on our expertise. That as providers, we understood that we would collect expertise, but also in the moment share power. Listen to the people that we serve. Be curious about their experience and not let our knowing or knowledge supersede what someone in front of us is saying and showing us and expressing. The development and growth of CFTE has led us to this very moment, right? As we step out as our own independent nonprofit, starting as a small seedling, a small program, we look to the world around us to begin to redefine healing for people who have experienced trauma. That healing can and should be something that we can pull as a thread through many domains of our lives. So that I can go to the gym or the yoga studio or the physical therapy office or the doctor's office and have an opportunity for healing. That healing doesn't have to just be siloed in clinical spaces that many people won't have access to or don't have access to for a number of reasons. So we're looking to grow and expand and make healing accessible in many domains of life, regardless of geography, income, cultural norms. These last 24 years have also allowed us to bring this work into over 50 countries, First Nations, territories, and First Nations communities. Our mission is to educate and support leaders and providers who are rooted in community, who are based in community, to learn and to actualize these whole person methods of healing so that there's generated more access and so that it's sustainable. When people are in community and working and offering care in community, then it becomes sustainable rather than someone from the outside kind of coming in, offering, and then potentially leaving. Our scholarship initiative is one way we live into this mission. In each training, we welcome providers, leaders, community activists for full scholarship, partial scholarship, as a way to bring in folks, because we also know that the impacts of systemic trauma and relational trauma are financial, and that money is no representation of any one person's ability to facilitate healing, to perpetuate healing in their community. So this morning, we are welcoming you into community with us. There are so many ways to join us. One is being an ambassador, hoping that this morning you learn more about what we do so that you can share that with other people in your community, so that you can share the work that we do so we can continue to redefine what healing looks like and how opportunities for healing can exist everywhere we go as we carry our trauma with us everywhere that we go. As our morning continues, you'll hear from our wonderful guests and panelists about trauma healing as a public need. Trauma and PTSD are not just a clinical issue. Most of us in this room will experience a traumatic event at some point in our lives, and there's an impact of that. It's a big, massive social and cultural reality that requires courageous thinking and intervention. And I can't wait to share more about what we're doing with that as we're here. So I'll hand it off to my co-founder, Dave. But thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Great, everybody. Public speaking is not my forte, but I just want to say how touched I am that you all are here to be with us, kind of support us as we take our next steps, and to learn, to be courageous enough to learn about trauma and what trauma healing can look like. I'm the co-founder of CFTE with Jen. My job now is Director of Research and Public Policy. And as we begin to explore more robust presence for trauma care and mental health care as a public health agenda, it's important for us to build relationships with like-minded political leaders who want to be partners in this effort. As a now rising 5-term, recently just re-elected city councilor and former mayor of Cambridge, Sumbul Siddiqui is a tireless advocate for the health and well-being of her neighbors. Among her long list of contributions and accomplishments, I'd like to just highlight 2 that have direct bearing on the intersections of trauma, mental health, and embodiment. In 2021, while mayor, she helped create a free summer program for rising middle schoolers called Recess that provides young people with both STEAM education opportunities, but also, importantly, outdoor play. And there's the embodiment piece. Also that year, she started Cambridge Rise, one of the first guaranteed income pilots in the country, which provided 130 single caretakers $500 monthly stipend over 18 months. By accounts, a very successful program. Poverty is a mostly systemic issue, and it's deeply correlated with trauma. By lessening the crushing burden of poverty, people begin to have more agency and opportunity in their lives. Our understanding is that Sumbul will advocate to make that program permanent in her next term. So we'd like to thank Sumbul for her leadership and public care and invite her to come up and say a few words.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you all. I'm so short. Can you see me still? I'm really happy to be here, and I want to just start by thanking Dave and CFT for inviting me to celebrate your launch today as an independent nonprofit after more than 2 decades of such transformative work. That's such an incredible milestone. During my time on the city council, I've seen time and time again how mental health is truly foundational to the well-being of our residents. And when people have access to care, it is just so important. They feel seen and supported, and it really ripples through our whole community. Our young people do better, our families grow stronger, our neighborhoods become more connected, and our city becomes more compassionate and resilient. But as we've heard and as we know, access to care isn't equitable. Even here in this city, we are a tale of two cities. We have access to these health services, but too many residents, especially those who've experienced systematic trauma, displacement, economic hardship, they struggle to find care that feels affordable, relevant, and welcoming. And we know this type of access to care doesn't exist in a silo. It touches everything, touches our public health systems, housing, economic security. The list is very long. And that's why CFT's work means so much. You've really completely reimagined what healing can look like. You understand that this type of care, trauma-informed care, has to be embodied, inclusive, and grounded in evidence, recognizing that trauma lives not just in the mind, but in the body. And with that understanding, we've built these new pathways to healing for people who might never have found them otherwise. And what I especially love is how you bring together community and science, blending that rigorous research with deep humanity. That's something we take pride here in the city of Cambridge, being a city where innovation and compassion and go hand in hand and should go hand in hand. And as your organization steps into this new chapter, I'm really hopeful. I'm hopeful that you'll keep expanding access, training practitioners across the world and here, and reminding us that trauma isn't just this individual experience. It's this community issue that really does require community healing. And your work really feels especially relevant and urgent right now at a time when our healthcare system is both in need of reform and also under attack. And so the work that you're doing just doesn't restore lives, it restores a sense of possibility. And it reminds us that healing isn't a privilege of the few. It's really a right for everyone. So I'll end it by saying on behalf of the city of Cambridge, thank you to all that you've done, everyone who's been involved in the organization, and really all that's ahead. It's so exciting. It's really been exciting to learn more about the organization and share more about the organization. And just a huge congratulations on this exciting new chapter and entering our vibrant nonprofit sector that we have here. And thank you for helping us imagine and build a community where well-being is truly within reach for all. So thank you so much for letting me say a few words. It's great to be here this morning.
Thank you so much, Sumbul. In 2006, our group became part of the Justice Resource Institute. I recall a sense of genuine optimism among our colleagues at the time. Becoming part of JRI provided stability and potential for the future that folks were craving. Personally, it was when I met Tara and Carrie and Mark and Andy that I felt like we had more than just a new home, like to be as a business, but partners for the future. And that remained our experience for 19 years. Today, we'd like to recognize JRI for two things: their outstanding 50+ years of care for the people of New England as a premier social service agency, and more personally, for their kindness, patience, and generosity toward us as we built something new. We'd like to invite Carrie and Tara to come up and just accept our appreciation and an award on our behalf. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here. Thanks so much. These guys have genuinely been by our side and supportive for 20 years, and we're really so grateful to them.
Great. Okay, so I get to introduce our second award recipient. So it's my honor to present our very first Impact Award to Lee Hawkins this morning. And witnessing Lee's process and journey of uncovering and facing the truth and deep impact of his family's multi-generational history of enslavement, Jim Crow, and apartheid has been powerful, to say the least. The courage to investigate his lineage while bringing curiosity, grace, and tenderness has been deeply moving for all of us at CFTE. Thank you, Lee, for all that you continue to show us and about what healing intergenerationally can look like, and for the profound impact that you have had on our community. Please. Come on up.
Yeah, so Dave Emerson asked for 8 to 10 minutes, so I'm gonna have Dave Dykeman hold me to 8 minutes. It is a distinct honor as well as an eminent privilege to receive this prestigious award. Thank you so much, and for the work you do, to Dave and the whole group. Also, the Broad Institute and my esteemed fellow panelists and everybody who's here today. I'd love to hear more about the work that everybody does and how we ended up in this space together. I think it's really important. I Am Nobody's Slave was a very difficult book to write. As you can imagine, I think everybody here at some point has wondered about their family origin story. And in many ways, I think that we all are both empowered and victims of the pursuit of the American dream. You know, when I frame it in that way, I think that it sounds confusing because the way that the American dream is presented to us is much more in a positive light. But when we start to look at the complexity and the contradictions within it that kind of come out of our origin story, you know, we have a beautiful constitutional document, which is the most egalitarian document ever made. But in the context of that, to get to where we are today, there was a great deal of violence. And it took me a long time to be able to reach that conclusion, or I don't know if it's a conclusion, it's just an observation that continues to develop. But the big part of it was I had to go into my childhood. And Natalie Slopin is here and Kirsten, and we have so many different experts who deal with adverse childhood experiences. And when I did a fellowship dealing with that, I started to understand that my father, I felt, having grown up in Jim Crow apartheid, which I really didn't understand was apartheid. I thought it was segregation, was affected by that. And so I used to have nightmares when I was a kid. And my mother would wake him up and say, "You're having a nightmare. It's okay. It's okay." And then I would ask him what he was dreaming about, and he would just say, "Alabama, Alabama." But he would never speak about Alabama, and this is something, that I see when I meet people from all walks of life, when you look at the political, social, economic frameworks that we're born into in pursuit of that American dream. In there are a lot of different, traumas. I just wrote a few down: Holocaust, Japanese incarceration, different forms of genocide and displacement, and Armenian genocide. So many different experiences that people's ancestors and elders were born into that shapes the way that they are raised. And in my case, I came from a very loving family, but if you read I Am Nobody's Slave, you'll see that I was very curious about the connection between corporal punishment and the belt that I received for discipline, and the whipping that my ancestors, my great-great-grandmother Charity Pugh, and my great-great-grandfather, Civil War Private Isaac Blakey, experienced when they were children. And I started to realize that we had 12 generations of people who went through slavery, and then 5 generations who lived through apartheid, which only ended 60 years ago. And that even though my family, as I discovered, had been in America since the 1600s, I had to anoint myself as a first generation American, because even though I do descend for Revolutionary War soldiers and Civil War soldiers, I'm part of the first generation in my family to be born equal to a white person and with equal constitutional rights. And so that tension, the book explores that tension between my father's upbringing as an apartheid survivor and my opportunity, and the incredible pressure that puts on us in the pursuit of the American dream to redeem the sacrifices of the previous generations. When we do not confront those kinds of traumas, or think in a deep way about those kinds of traumas, it presents in the way that it did when I started having my nightmares in my early 30s. And I wrote a book about a Black American family, but I wanted to really write a book about American history that would kind of trick people into thinking that they were reading about just an American family, and learning all of these things about history and how that ended up presenting 3 generations later from slavery as brain fog, negative loop thinking, anxiety, and the different kinds of nightmares that I was having at that time that forced me, that my body refused to keep the secrets that my brain wanted it to. And so the key here was that individual journey that I took to be able to free and liberate my bloodline through talking to my father for 4 years, and him sitting down and being gracious enough to sit down and explain to me where the belt came from and what he knew. And then I was able to go even deeper and name it and trace it to the plantation that it came from by contacting the white people in my family after finding out that I'm 20% from United Kingdom as a result of colonization. And so the inheritance of violence was something that went from the national family to the individual. And that's what we're here to discuss today, the individual, because we all have free agency, we have self-determination, and we have free will. And how we decide to affect, to address and confront all of these different circumstances that are overwhelming to our bodies, as Jen so eloquently stated, is our choice. Even that exercise that we just did, you know, think about the way that that affects you when you're cognizant and conscious about that. And so for me, I tried my best in this book to really explain to people how I got to that place. And how I got there was something that I'm going to leave you with, a concept that I call genealogical resolution. And that's understanding that whatever we inherit from the previous generations, we cannot begin to fully process them and move past them, you know, because the one thing is we inherit so many good things from previous generations. And so we want to keep those and bury the toxic practices that contribute to the trauma that come from the political, economic, and social frameworks that we're born into. But we cannot begin to do that unless we start to be more willing to sit down and interview the oldest person in the room. And I know that we have the holidays coming. So think about that. You know, think about talking to your elders, and not just about when they were born and when their grandmother was born and when she died, but more about that dash in between and the difficult parts, and not jumping right into those, but certainly giving them an opportunity to speak. And then what you find is they begin to almost have this feeling of urgency because they're aware of their mortality at that point. And that is the time that we begin to break through, when we give people an opportunity to explain how they came to America, why they came to America, and that journey that came in. You know, when I did it, I found out that I've had a murder in my family every generation since 1837, including my grandfather, and both great grandfathers. But my grandparents were 5 and 9 years old when their fathers were killed, but neither of them told my father that their fathers had been killed, and my father never told me that mine had been killed. And so I was born into a family of murder survivors that anybody from external to us, what they saw was, they saw the Cosbys, right? And in many ways, I guess we were, right? We are, but but you know, no one ever talked about what Theo was dealing with on a day-to-day basis in the private school that he attended, or what Dr. Huxtable and his wife were dealing with on their jobs on a day-to-day basis. And so these are all things that are presented through the Black American experience, but they touch on probably everybody in here in some way. I know Ranjiv and I were talking about him being from India, and we were talking about the different ways that, you know, he was born on the year that India gave its independence, or received its independence. And I was telling him, you know, in a way that was something that was unique about you in comparison to the previous generations. And so processing the good aspects of that, but not forgetting in the ways that it affected us in our lives, and giving our parents and our grandparents and elders the opportunity to tell these stories, not through the lens of judgment, but through love and curiosity, because the highest form of love is not judgment, it is curiosity, and giving people a chance to open up. And that's when we begin to start our healing. So the last thing I'll say is, I hope if you read I Am Nobody's Slave, and I am going to stick around and sign some copies, that you'll focus really heavily, not just on my individual journey and the different ACEs that I faced as a child, but also on the benevolent experiences in the community that led, you know, institutions such as the YMCA to play such a profound impact on my life and in my family's life, which sort of offset a lot of the things that would have probably shortened my life expectancy, that shortened my father's. You know, I feel that Jim Crow killed my father, and if you read the book, you'll see. And so, but we don't have to carry that forward every generation. So the fact that you're here today is really a good sign, because not only will we will address trauma as a community issue, but we still have to understand what they tell us on the plane every day when we get on a plane. What do they say? Put your oxygen mask on first and then assist your child. That's what we want to do, is leave the next generation with the tools, conflict resolution, nonviolent social change, all of these tools to be able to rectify the things that our ancestors and elders were unable to address. So thank you, and God bless you, and continue this marvelous, fascinating work. I know the next 20 years are going to be even stronger. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. I'd like to invite our panelists to come up. So inviting Lee back, and Ranjiv and Karsten. As you're ready, feel free to bring some water if you like. Thanks, everybody. Feel free to move and stretch any way you like. Feel free to choose any chair you want here. So we're honored to be joined by this really distinguished panel to have a conversation to kind of round out our program here. At CFTE, we've been focused on creating new models of care for people who experience trauma. But in a parallel way, we've also been engaged in expanding access to trauma care in general, focused particularly on those who are not served adequately by the clinical system as it is. In their unique ways, expanding access to trauma and mental health care is what Lee Hawkins, Karsten Koenen, and Ranjiv Benjamin are dedicated to as well. It's this shared project of making trauma healing more available and accessible that we'd like to talk a little bit about today. Our intention is to have some time at the end for audience questions, so feel free to kind of think about those as we go. Ranjiv, I'll turn to you first. About 2 years ago, you stepped into a newly created role at the North Shore YMCA as Executive Director of Mental Wellness. Can you talk a little bit about why that role was created and what some of your initial goals have been and how it's going so far?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Dave for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here and share in this celebration. So as Dave mentioned, I am the Executive Director of Mental Wellness for the YMCA of the North Shore. And we're actually a collection of 7 YMCAs that it's Salem, Beverly, Marblehead, Ipswich. We go up into Cape Ann, Gloucester and Rockport, west into Haverhill. We dip into New Hampshire and Plastow. So we have quite a wide geographical range. We are a large organization. We have 63,000 members who attend our Ys. A lot of them are there for fitness, so it's our fitness centers, yoga, Zumba, jazzercise. We also have a lot of childcare and education programs. We have about 3,000 kids a day in our early education and after-school programs. Summer camp is a big deal, about 4,500 kids a day in our summer programs. Affordable housing, we have about 500 people who live in our affordable housing programs. And we also have a alternative to suspension program for kids who would otherwise be suspended from schools for substance use. We also teach kids with autism how to be safe in the water. So a wide range of programs. The WISE mission has this interesting phrase, promote healthy living in mind, body, and spirit. And it's actually been there since 1890. So it's 135 years that we've been thinking about whole person wellness, which is really amazing. But the mind wasn't really a focus in the WISE programs until COVID hit. And so when we saw this uptick in mental health challenges across the board, the Y and a few donors got together and decided that they really wanted to create a new mental wellness initiative. And so that started, that's called One Door. And so I joined the Y a couple of years ago to lead that program. And for me, it's been just a lot of fun to be, I come from community mental health where I'm used to the DSM and billing and diagnosis and all of that kind of fun stuff. But to have this freedom to really think about 63,000 people and 3,000 kids, and just to really sort of think about what we can create. And to be able to bring mental health care and trauma care and support just to the community with no diagnosis, no need for the DSM involved. So it's been a lot of partnerships that we're working on. So for example, I'll highlight a few. We have a great multi-year partnership with McLean Hospital. They have a group called the School Consultation Service Team. And they have been working with our staff to train them on evidence-based practices to really work with a lot of the kids that we serve. I mean, we have kids with autism, ADHD, bringing in trauma, anxiety, and depression, and our staff are not clinicians. And so how do we help these kids in our programs and help keep them in our programs? So we're on this sort of multi-year training program with McLean. We have another really wonderful partnership with an organization called Cartwheel. They are typically partnered with school districts, and they offer virtual therapy and parent guidance, psychiatric services as well. But the great thing is they have no wait list. So we are actually able to get kids into treatment within 7 to 10 days because of this partnership. And then finally, it's my time with Dave and the Center for Trauma and Embodiment. I've always loved trauma-sensitive yoga. And one day, about a year ago, I was falling down a Google rabbit hole, and I found Dave in that hole. So I reached out to Dave, and we've been in conversations, I think almost every few weeks for about a year now, and thinking about how to bring trauma care to the Y. And if we think about 63,000 members, and I think the number is what, 70% of people have had some trauma experience. So that's 44,000 people coming into our doors. So Dave and I worked on, actually with Jen, we did a 2-hour overview of trauma-informed care for about 30, maybe 30, 40 of our health and wellness staff. And just 2 weeks ago, we finished a 20-hour, 6-part mini-series with our about 15 of our health and wellness staff. So fitness instructors, coaches, yoga, Zumba, and now they have this training in trauma-informed yoga, trauma-sensitive yoga, and trauma-informed weightlifting. And now the next step is to figure out how we actually bring this into the community, into all our classes. So it's been really quite a journey. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks so much, Rajiv. And Anna's here too, who worked on the training with you. Great. Karistan, you wear several hats as as a professor. So check this out. As
Please don't list them all. It's too stressful.
Professor of Psychiatric Epidemiology, the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. I think it's a good range. Psychiatric Epidemiology, Director of the Population Mental Health Lab, also at Chan, and as leader here of the Broad Trauma Initiative. So with all of that, what's your approach to thinking and working with trauma at such a large scale? Can you talk a little bit about 1 or 2 projects that might help bring this home for people? Like, how do you think about it broadly? And then what are some things you're working on that are standing out?
Sure. Before just mentioning some projects, I want to say I can feel myself getting very emotional here. And I might get emotional while I speak, because when I came to the Broad, so I was recruited from Columbia University 10 years ago to the Broad and to Harvard. And I was recruited to the Broad to lead efforts to improve genomic diversity, so which I won't go into. But in my head, my goal was to bring Broad level science to trauma. I wanted to have the best science in the world, the same science that if any of you had family members who have cancer, the same science that is making cancer a chronic disease, not a terminal illness, that is curing genetic diseases that kids are born with. I wanted to bring that level of brain power to the world of trauma. At the same time, partnering with the community and listening, when Jen was speaking, listening to the voices of people who are affected from all walks of life. And also, I've had my own, I met Dave in his yoga class in Black Lotus 20 years ago when I was working at the VA, and not be we joke in our group, but not be a brainist, meaning recognize that trauma affects the whole body. So anyway, I sort of getting chills here, seeing this all coming together today. So thank you. It's just such an honor to be able to host you. So, and a couple of things to think about. First is my group has been very involved in documenting this sort of, when we hear this number 70 to 80%, we've been involved with that work to demonstrate that when you go in the community, when you survey people in the community, not just in the hospital, most people have experienced a traumatic event. And something that comes up all the time, one of my first studies was in this cohort called the Nurse Health Study. It's 100,000 women they follow. I did a trauma study in there. This is about 15 years ago. And we sent out a questionnaire, and kind of a typical one, listed the events. I added some other things. And just on the named events, which were the things we think about, disaster, sexual violence, child abuse, 80% of the women indicate an event. But what really struck me is, this is the olden days, I'm going to age myself. I set up an 800 number, an answering machine, to get numbers to people, so people could call if the questionnaire, again, this is sort of like the resources weren't as good. It wasn't just like you could Google trauma care. So I came in after the questionnaire was sent out, and I got call after call. And it wasn't that people were upset for me asking the questions, which is what people always think. If you ask people about trauma, they're going to get upset. It's in which I have never found to be the case. People said, "You missed my experience." And I had call after call with woman after woman. This is a women's cohort, about an experience they had that I think if I shared it, we all agree was traumatic and wasn't on the list. So even when we think of the 70, 80% number, it doesn't include everyone's experience. So that's one way I think about it. And then going into a couple projects. So one thing I'm really interested in, my public health hat, is what are the policies? So if everyone's experiencing trauma, and we need to offer healing at the individual level, but are there things we can do as a society, whether federal policy, state policy, and I think the city of Cambridge is doing this, to shift the curve, to make it a little more possible, a little more, people a little more able to engage in trauma healing. And so things like, I have colleagues at the School of Public Health who have studied things like parent support, child support payments, income support policies, and how they, although they don't maybe increase access to mental health care or people accessing, they actually improve the mental health of parents, which then is good for kids. So how can we think of that? If we cut food assistance to children, we are getting in the way of trauma healing. People don't have enough food if they have food insecurity. So we think about those kinds of things and try to support that work. Another program that we're doing is in the medical system. So Archana Basu, who's a colleague at Mass General, she's developed an integrated primary care program, which is where mental health professionals are embedded in pediatrics and identify children. So pediatricians, if parents come in with child's having more tantrums or sleep problems, or there's some family stressor, they identify them in pediatrics and have access to behavioral health services in pediatrics. She's enabled it. They do not need a psychiatric or mental health or developmental disability diagnosis. And most of those cases, they can help and support with a few sessions with someone trained. And then they have a program that if you need more support, then they're referred to, they've developed programs for both teens and parent support programs, so group programs for parents. So that's one way, is how we could, even when we're in the system, how can we work out of primary care? And then the other way we're thinking about it, you were saying at a population level, we're also thinking at the Broad, we're really trying to take a whole body approach to trauma. So much of work, and it's important work, has focused on how it changes our brain, but it also changes the cells in our blood and how we breathe and all these other aspects. And My goal is not just to do that just because it's cool science, which it is really cool science, and there's so much technology, is this idea of bringing the best science to understanding how trauma gets in our body and results in disease. And the ultimate goal is to improve and inform healing and better do that for people. So those are some of the things, and happy to talk about any of that, folks, after. Get in touch, keep in touch. Thank you.
That's amazing. Yeah, it really is it's a big change. It sounds like a revolutionary change just to apply that level of science to trauma. And trauma is usually something we don't talk about. And we can probably contemplate together why that is, because it's so personal, it's so prevalent potentially. And one of the messages I'm hearing is just an invitation to create space for wondering, for curiosity in Lee's word about what this is, and then how can we face it and approach it and address it. So Lee, as an award-winning journalist, you focused for decades, shining a light on historical trauma and racial trauma in the United States through the prisms of our shared national story, and it is a shared story. Little notes here. And also your personal family history, as you noted. How has thinking about trauma in both of those ways, as a collective experience and as a personal phenomenon, how has that shaped the way you understand it? And what do you think healing can look like in both of those domains?
Well, for me, I pursued it through the lens of slavery and Jim Crow and the common, Black American experience for those of us who are foundational to this country, and then showed how it rippled through the generations. And for me, I think the greatest awareness it brought me was how close in proximity I was to the last generation of people in my family who lived under chattel slavery. And my grandmother was actually babysat by my great-great-grandmother. She died in 1930, Grandma Charity, who spent the first 30 years of her life in bondage, and then the last 60 years of her life living under apartheid. And there were a lot of different tragedies that she went through in her life, but she was a very resilient and strong woman. But the hardest parts of it was to go back and to study the plantation that she lived on, and to talk to the family members who also descend from the other side of slavery, to go to their homes. And one of them had a picture of General Lee in his living room, and to begin to kind of confront how close we are, and to accept that after slavery, Jim Crow came along, and that was, just another 100 years. And there was no way that I would not be affected by that, right? And so from the individual perspective, I had to understand more fully how that affected me, and then it enabled me to write about the Tulsa Massacre from an intergenerational perspective, and the dreams of Jack and Daisy Scott, which was just a family that was affected by the Tulsa Massacre, and how that impacted their economic inheritance, right? Because I did that for the Wall Street Journal. And so we see how these atrocities, no matter what background we're from, affect people as a whole, but then affect us as individuals. And so it's changed my whole way of thinking. When Harriet Tubman crossed into freedom, she said, "I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. And I can tell you that I'm not," right? So when we start to understand that, I don't know, 30 to 40% of our socialization and our worldview can be impacted by people we never met, our great-great-grandparents. And so taking the parts of a traumatized woman's view of the world and implementing that in raising your children in the 1970s and 80s isn't the best approach. And so beginning to give myself some the permission to break free and to take the best and move forward with it. And I guess the last thing that it's helped me understand doing this work is the tremendous disconnect that I see between the elites and sort of the gatekeepers in our government, and also sometimes, and this is why I love to hear what you're talking about, is because academe, right? Academe, and particularly writing about trauma concerning Black people, you know, intergenerational trauma. There is such a tendency for us to involve ourselves in respectability politics and wanting to show, a lot of times when we're Black in institutions, wanting to show the majority public that we're more like you than you think we are, and burying the aspects of the trauma that are wreaking havoc on parts of our communities that don't have the benefit of being in these institutions, right? And so when I've gone in the world, you know, I've had the privilege of being able to tell the stories of family members people who are from murder survivor families who have dealt with, you know, the homicide crisis that affecting so many different Black families today. And it is disproportionately higher in our community because of the political, social, and economic injustices. And what I find is a real resistance for me when I'm writing about or speaking about or podcasting about homicide, or podcasting about the fact that 17 states still allow corporal punishment, and that in schools and Black kids are disproportionately affected, partially because some of our Black educators believe in the practice, which is really still ingrained, you know, from a colonizer's perspective. And so when we get into touching the nerves, that's what I've learned, that these nerves that I touch in these more iconoclastic areas of and non-traditional areas of focus tend to disrupt in the elite institutions. And so what I'm trying to do is give people the language to talk about these things so we can begin to address this. And I love what you said before when you were talking about Harrison, or maybe it was Natalie, about how the Broad is very science intensive, right? And so now bringing this to the fore and bringing it all together for the intersectionality piece of it is so important, because that's how we get to the people and the people who we're trying to serve.
Yeah, that's, you know, it sounds like one thing I'm just hearing from all of us is the intimacy of trauma in so many ways, interpersonally, in our bodies, in our histories, in our families. But yet we have a system that tends to intellectualize it and pathologize it. So if we keep beating that drum, the pathology drum, the intellectual drum, we're missing the truth of trauma. Like the intimacy is the word that just keeps coming up for me here. So we'd like to just invite one or two questions from the audience if anything is coming up here that anybody just wants to check in on, and our group will be here for the next 30 minutes as well. So anything from the group in the large session that anyone wants to bring in?
Can I share one thing that's happened
for sure.
recently that people, I think no one in this audience or on the panel will be surprised. So one of the things that has launched at the Broad is called the Biology of Adversity Project, which a colleague leads, which is related to the Broad Trauma Initiative. But there was they did a press release, and there was an internal email that went out to Broad employees about this new project, and reach out if you're interested. And I know the intention of that email was saying, you know, if as a scientist you're interested, reach out. But what we got, which again, I was not surprised at, but people were surprised at here, was a lot of people wanting to talk about their adversity and trauma. And how could they share their experience to help inform the science? And so that's just an example of, my colleagues who are basic scientists, so I don't fault them for not knowing this, said, what do I do now? Like, I'm getting all these emails. And I said, well, let's start talking to the people. Like, let's just start talking to them. What do they want? Do we want a community advisory board within the organization? It could inform the programming for people in. So it sort of has opened up a whole conversation where I think even with me here and having been here 10 years, people thought it was like out there. And it's, in here too. So that's just, I don't know, there's just a funny thing that happened this last week.
Finding words, finding language for people to have access. So important, so important. Great, yeah, looks like we do have a question here. And I'll repeat it, by the way.
Thanks for putting this together, and it's amazing to have such a diverse panel of experts. But can you guys talk about kind of how is the macro level playing into this? West or other countries are getting more receptive.
Great, so a question really about, does it feel like there's a bigger kind of atmosphere of more acceptance, a capacity or willingness to talk about trauma? And does anybody want to just take that? Do you feel that in your own experience? There we go.
No. Yeah, just really quickly, because I have something that's been weighing on my heart recently, and that's that it's really got to be done at the family, community, and educational level. If when I've looked into trauma through the generations, starting with our origin story, I've just seen that if you trace the line going back, you always find the government either being complicit or codifying, the violence, right? And so, and I'm speaking mainly about violence because that's the aspect of trauma that I focus a lot on. And so, we can look to our government for solutions, but I think that whether you talk about the fact that I just talked about 17 states still allowing corporal punishment in schools, and they're the states that generally have the highest homicide rates that have been over generations. How is that possible? If we were to have a conversation right now on the floor of Congress about corporal punishment, it would all be rooted in this notion of moralism and Christian values, and which are important to me as a Christian, but I don't see that as Christianity, right? And so having a debate about that and wanting our government to do the right thing is not likely. I think what we have to understand is we are making progress from a community level, but we also have to think more consciously as families and hold our schools to higher standards in terms of suspension rates and excessive discipline and the different things that children are dealing with when they are maybe dealing with different issues at home, such as food insecurity and violence, and then coming to school, which is supposed to be a safe space, and having to be re-traumatized, and then going back and taking care of younger siblings and things like that. And so that kind of sensitivity is missing, I think, and it's going to have to be led through institutions like this and through the community and to the family. And once again, family values, that doesn't have to be a conservative ideology. We have to still, focus about, even if the family looks different than it used to, how are we teaching our kids from a very young age about conflict resolution and giving them a peaceful environment where we can start growing their brains at the early educational level so that they can succeed and inherit a more peaceful world.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. We're going to be here for conversation and more hanging out and food, but want to honor your time and honor the live stream folks. So we have a raffle with some different things, some things that CFTE is offering, time with us and mentorship, but also some Boston area experiences. Feel free to check that out. And for anyone who was on the live stream and had any sound challenges, we will send you the recording, so you'll have access to that. Yeah, thank you for being here. And I don't really know what else to say, but this is really moving, and I'm really looking forward to what's next for us, and I hope you're a part of that. Thank you all.